Welcome to Stories of HFY, your ultimate destination for thrills, adventure, and entertainment. Hit subscribe and turn on the bell to join us on this epic journey. Let's create unforgettable moments together. The Great Reptilian Misconception. Senior researcher ZYX427 flicked their sensory appendages in irritation as they reviewed the preliminary scans of the third planet from this unremarkable yellow star. Another primitive world, another set of predictable life forms. The holographic display before them showed various creatures basking in the sunlight across different continents, scaly quadrupeds sprawled on rocks, elongated forms coiled beneath foliage, and massive reptilians floating in murky waters. Chief taxonomist called out Junior Observer Ven 12 from their monitoring station. I've compiled the initial temperature correlation data. These creatures follow the standard Class 3 thermal-dependent patterns we've documented on 17 other worlds. ZYX427 emitted a bored acknowledgement tone. After 3 centuries of cataloging primitive planets, they'd seen it all. Every world with sufficient atmospheric oxygen eventually produced reptilian life forms, and they all followed the same tedious patterns. Solar absorption periods followed by brief bursts of activity, minimal energy expenditure, and simplified predator-prey relationships. The research vessel Empirical Truth hung in geosynchronous orbit above a large island chain in what the indigenous dominant species called the Pacific Ocean. The ship's quantum sensors probed the planet's biosphere, collecting terabytes of data about the various scaled creatures that had somehow survived the numerous extinction events in this world's turbulent history. Fascinating, muttered secondary analyst Creen 89, their chromatic scales shifting to the deep purple of scientific intrigue. These reptilians have persisted far longer than the current dominant species. They've survived multiple planetary cataclysms, yet maintained virtually identical behavioral patterns to those we've observed elsewhere. ZYX427 glided across the observation deck, their hover field humming softly. The walls around them displayed an array of real-time footage. A massive carnivorous reptile lying motionless in shallow water, several small-scaled creatures performing basic thermoregulation routines, and a particularly large specimen basking on a rocky outcrop. Update the galactic database, ZYX427 commanded their neural interface. Planet designation, Sol 3. Reptilian assessment, standard class 3 metabolic efficiency patterns. Threat level, minimal. Primary characteristics, thermal dependency, limited mobility, predictable behavioral algorithms. The ship's artificial intelligence acknowledged the update with a soft chime. Another world categorized, another set of life forms neatly classified and filed away in the vast archives of the Galactic Survey Corps. Senior researcher, Ven 12 interrupted, their voice modulation indicating mild confusion. I'm detecting some anomalous readings from the larger island masses. The heat signatures of certain specimens don't align with our standard models. ZYX427 dismissed the concern with a wave of their primary appendage. Statistical outliers. We've seen them before. Document them as evolutionary dead ends, attempts at higher metabolic functions that ultimately prove unsustainable in reptilian physiology. The research team continued their orbital survey, methodically documenting what they assumed was yet another predictable chapter in the galaxy's vast catalog of life. Their sophisticated equipment recorded and analyzed, their AI systems categorized and filed, and their centuries of experience led them to comfortable, familiar conclusions. None of them paid particular attention to the detailed readings from a cluster of islands in what the locals called Indonesia. None of them thought twice about the slightly elevated metabolic signatures from the specimens designated as Varanus komodoensis. And none of them questioned their fundamental assumptions about the limitations of reptilian capability. The Empirical Truth adjusted its orbit slightly, its sensors continuing their meticulous work. In the ship's vast database, Earth's reptiles were being neatly filed away under familiar categories and comfortable theories. The research team began preparing for their standard surface expedition protocols, confident in their safety parameters and assessment algorithms. They had no way of knowing that their carefully constructed scientific frameworks were about to collide with reality at approximately 12 miles per hour. Prepare the landing party, ZWX 427 ordered, their scales shifting to the confident gold of anticipated routine. Standard Class 3 safety protocols will be more than sufficient. After all, they added with a touch of scientific condescension, they're just reptiles. What could possibly surprise us? The ship's AI dutifully recorded this statement, marking it for what would soon become one of the most infamous examples of scientific presumption in the Galactic Survey Corps' history. The landing party. The crystalline landing pod pierced through Earth's atmosphere, its quantum shielding dispersing the heat of re-entry into beautiful prismatic patterns. Inside, senior researcher ZYX 427 reviewed the final deployment checklist while their team calibrated their environmental suits for the tropical climate of Komodo Island. Adjust your sensory filters for high humidity, secondary analyst Crane 89 advised, their scales rippling with the pale green of mild concern. These primitive conditions might interfere with our standard observation equipment. The pod's interior hummed with the soft whir of atmospheric processors and the gentle ping of bioscanners. Through the transparent hull, the verdant landscape of the island spread out below them, a patchwork of dense forest and sun-baked clearings. Landing zone selected, announced the pod's AI. Minimal indigenous presence detected. Optimal observation conditions for local reptilian species. Junior observer Ven 12 shuffled through holographic readouts, their auxiliary appendages twitching with excitement. Initial scans indicate 17 distinct specimens within our observation radius, all displaying typical thermal-dependent behavior patterns. The pod touched down in a small clearing, its adaptive camouflage rendering it nearly invisible against the tropical backdrop. The team waited as their equipment acclimatized to the planet's atmospheric conditions. Remember, ZYX 427 instructed, their voice modulator set to teaching frequency, we maintain standard Class 3 observation distances. No need for advanced barrier fields or emergency protocols. These creatures barely possess enough energy to digest their meals, let alone pose any threat to our survey team. The outer hatch dissolved, allowing Earth's warm air to flood their environmental chamber. The team's suits automatically adjusted, compensating for the primitive atmosphere's composition. One by one they emerged onto the alien soil, their hover fields keeping them several inches above the ground. Fascinating primitive environment, Crane 89 observed, their scientific instruments spinning quietly as they analyzed the surrounding vegetation. The ambient temperature suggests optimal conditions for reptilian lethargy. We should expect minimal movement from our subjects. A rustle in the nearby underbrush drew their attention. The team's recording devices activated automatically, preparing to document what they assumed would be another predictable example of basic reptilian behavior. Specimen detected, Ven 12 announced, adjusting their observation lens. Approaching at typical Class 3 velocity. Beginning standard documentation sequence. Through the foliage emerged a Komodo dragon, its muscular form moving with a grace that somehow escaped the team's preconceptions. The creature paused, its forked tongue sampling the air, head tilting as it processed the unfamiliar scents of the alien observers. Excellent specimen, ZYX 427 noted, their scales shifting to the bright yellow of scientific satisfaction. Notice the typical reptilian pause pattern. It's probably preparing for an extended period of inactivity. Let's set up our long-term observation equipment. The team began deploying their sophisticated monitoring devices, each designed to track the slow, methodical movements typical of reptilian species across the galaxy. None of them noticed how the Komodo dragon's muscles tensed, or how its eyes tracked their movements with an intelligence that defied their careful classifications. I'm detecting some unusual readings, Ven 12 mentioned, their secondary eyes widening slightly. The specimen's metabolic rate appears to be accelerating? Impossible, ZYX 427 dismissed, not bothering to look up from their equipment calibration. Your instruments must need recalibration for this atmosphere. Reptilians simply don't. The rest of their statement was lost in a sudden flurry of activity. The Komodo dragon, apparently tired of being underestimated, decided to demonstrate exactly why Earth's reptiles deserved a category of their own. The creature exploded into motion, its powerful legs propelling it forward with a speed that sent the aliens' instruments into chaos. Warning signals blared as their carefully calibrated devices struggled to track movement patterns that, according to all their research, should have been impossible. Emergency protocols. Crane 89 shrieked, their scales flashing emergency crimson. The specimen is exceeding all projected velocity parameters. The research team scattered, their hover field straining as they attempted to maintain their dignity while fleeing from what they had dismissed as a primitive life form. The Komodo dragon pursued them with relentless determination, its sprint reaching speeds that would force the Galactic Survey Corps to rewrite several chapters of their xenobiology textbooks. This defies all established theories, ZYX-427 shouted, their scientific certainty crumbling as rapidly as their experimental equipment. Quick! Back to the pod. We need to reassess our fundamental assumptions about reptilian capabilities. As they retreated in what would later be officially documented as a strategic scientific withdrawal, their instruments captured readings that would revolutionize the galaxy's understanding of Earth's reptilian species. The Komodo dragon, seemingly satisfied with demonstrating the folly of their presumptions, slowed to a walk, its mission of shattering alien preconceptions thoroughly accomplished. Inside the hastily resealed pod, the research team huddled around their data displays, their scales cycling through various shades of shock and scientific bewilderment. Well, Ven 12 ventured, breaking the stunned silence, I suppose we should update the classification protocols? The encounter. The tropical sun beat down mercilessly as the alien research team regrouped at their hastily established observation post. Their earlier retreat, which ZYX-427 steadfastly refused to classify as running away in panic, had forced them to reconsider their approach. Now, perched on a rocky outcrop with modified security fields humming around them, they attempted to salvage their scientific dignity. Our preliminary data must be corrupt, ZYX-427 muttered, their scales flickering between the deep blue of scientific confusion and the muted gray of wounded pride. No reptilian species should be capable of such rapid locomotion without severe metabolic consequences. Crane 89 hovered near the edge of their protective barrier, adjusting their sensory equipment for the fourth time. Perhaps we should consider the possibility that Earth's reptiles have evolved along a different pathway then. A warning chirp from their instruments cut off the rest of their suggestion. 50 meters below their position, something massive moved through the underbrush with deliberate purpose. New specimen detected, Ven 12 announced, their voice modulator quivering slightly. Significantly larger than our previous encounter. Calculating mass, oh dear. Through their observation screens, they watched as a fully grown Komodo dragon emerged into a sunlit clearing. The creature moved with the confidence of an apex predator, its muscular form a testament to millions of years of evolutionary refinement. Fascinating scale patterns, Crane 89 noted, attempting to maintain scientific objectivity while simultaneously backing away from their observation equipment. The locomotor efficiency suggests. The dragon's head snapped toward their position, forked tongue sampling the air. Despite their sophisticated camouflage technology, despite their elevated position, despite every assumption about reptilian sensory capabilities, they had been detected. Impossible, ZYX-427 breathed, watching their carefully constructed theories crumble in real time. Their sensory apparatus shouldn't be this advanced. The galactic database clearly states. The Komodo dragon chose that moment to demonstrate exactly what it thought of the galactic database. With explosive force, it launched itself up the rocky slope, covering ground at a speed that sent their instruments into another frenzy of contradictory readings. 12 miles per hour. Ven 12 screeched, their auxiliary appendages flailing in scientific distress. It's maintaining 12 Earth miles per hour up a 40-degree incline. The security field crackled as the team instinctively pressed backward, their hover units whining in protest. The dragon reached their position in seconds, its powerful claws finding purchase on surfaces their instruments had classified as too steep for reptilian locomotion. Fascinating, Crane 89 managed to squeak, their scales now a pale shade of terror rarely seen in scientific circles. The muscular coordination and energy output suggest a complete revision of our understanding of Earth's evolutionary, revise later, retreat now. ZUX 427 commanded, abandoning the last shreds of their scientific composure. The team scrambled to salvage their equipment as the Dragon breached their outer security perimeter with embarrassing ease. Their instruments, calibrated for documenting what they had assumed would be lazy basking behavior, now struggled to track the creature's rapid movements. The Dragon's advancement forced them into an increasingly undignified withdrawal, their hover field straining to maintain distance from snapping jaws that seemed entirely too energetic for a primitive reptile. The bacterial content in their saliva? Ven 12 shouted, multitasking between running and reading data streams. The complexity of their hunting strategies. The endurance factors. Everything we assumed was wrong. The chase led them through dense vegetation, across rocky terrain, and finally to the edge of a cliff overlooking the ocean. The research team huddled together, their scientific methodology thoroughly derailed by the reality of Earth's reptilian capabilities. I propose, ZUX 427 stated with as much dignity as they could muster while backing away from an advancing Komodo dragon, that we revise our classification system. Effective immediately. The dragon, now joined by two others emerging from nearby cover, seemed to regard them with what could only be described as predatory amusement. The team's instruments, those that still functioned, recorded readings that would revolutionize galactic understanding of reptilian potential. Secondary proposal, Crane 89 added, their voice rising several octaves as the dragons moved to flank them. We acknowledge that perhaps, just perhaps, our assumptions about Earth's biological diversity were somewhat limited. In the end, their retreat to the landing pod set new speed records for alien research teams on Earth. As they broke atmosphere, their sensors captured one final image. 3 Komodo dragons, still maintaining that impossible 12-mile-per-hour sprint, seeing off the departing aliens with what looked suspiciously like satisfied expressions. Well, Ven 12 offered as they accelerated toward the safety of orbit, at least we've gathered enough data to justify a complete overhaul of the galactic classification system. ZUX 427, their scales still flickering between embarrassment and scientific excitement, could only nod. Sometimes, they reflected, the most valuable scientific discoveries came not from careful observation, but from running for your life from things you thought you understood. The revelation. Aboard the empirical truth, chaos reigned in the most scientifically rigorous way possible. Holographic displays flickered across the observation deck, each screen revealing another shattered assumption about Earth's reptilian species. Senior researcher ZUX 427 hovered before the central data projection, their scales cycling through shades of disbelief as they reviewed the footage for the 100th time. Play it again, they commanded, mandibles clicking with nervous energy. Focus on the metabolic readings during the pursuit phase. The ship's AI complied, projecting a three-dimensional recreation of their encounter. The image of the Komodo dragon erupted into motion, its every movement defying centuries of galactic research. Look at these muscle density readings, secondary analyst Crane 89 exclaimed, their auxiliary eyes widening as they processed new data streams. Their cellular efficiency exceeds anything in our database. And these hunting strategies, they're not just running, they're calculating, coordinating. Junior observer Ven 12 burst through the laboratory's quantum membrane, their appendages clutching fresh analysis reports. Emergency update from the deep scan results. You won't believe what we found in their biological archives. The team gathered around a new holographic display as Ven 12's trembling appendages uploaded the data. Images materialized in the air. A basilisk lizard running across water, a black mamba striking at near-invisible speeds, a frilled-neck lizard sprinting bipedally across scorching desert sand. Impossible, Crane 89 whispered, their scientific vocabulary temporarily deserting them. According to all our models, these adaptations shouldn't, they couldn't. Our models, ZUX 427 interrupted, their voice modulator shifting to the tone of profound scientific revelation, are wrong. Completely, fundamentally, gloriously wrong. The observation deck fell silent save for the soft hum of processing computers. Centuries of carefully collected data, thousands of meticulous observations across hundreds of worlds, all appended by a few minutes of pursuit by an unexpectedly athletic reptile. Analysis complete, the ship's AI announced, its neutral tone somehow carrying a hint of smugness. Earth's reptilian species demonstrate 47 distinct capabilities previously classified as evolutionarily improbable or theoretically impossible. ZYX 427 initiated their species equivalent of a deep breath, a rapid color shift from crown to tail. Begin new research log. Title: The Great Reptilian Misconception, a fundamental reassessment of Earth's scaled species. Holographic screens shifted, displaying new data as the team immersed themselves in their revised understanding. They discovered that Earth's reptiles hadn't read their scientific papers about what reptiles could and couldn't do. They found species that could glide through air, sprint across water, and strike faster than their instruments could properly measure. These venom delivery systems. Crane 89 exclaimed, examining molecular structures of snake toxins. The complexity, the efficiency, we've been categorizing them as primitive while they've been perfecting molecular warfare. Ven 12, still processing thermal imaging data, suddenly emitted a high-pitched squeal of scientific excitement. The metabolic variations. They're not just adapting to temperature, they're manipulating it, using it. Some species can maintain elevated body temperatures through behavioral adaptations we never thought possible. The revelations continue to cascade. Every new piece of data forced them to reconsider another assumption. The hunting strategies of monitor lizards revealed problem-solving capabilities that defied their previous classifications. The stamina and speed of certain species suggested energy management systems that their xenobiologists had deemed impossible for primitive life forms. We need to completely restructure the galactic classification system, ZYX 427 declared, their scales now pulsing with the bright orange of scientific breakthrough. Earth's reptiles don't just deserve their own category. They demand an entirely new framework of understanding. The team worked feverishly, compiling their new findings into what would become one of the most controversial papers in galactic scientific history. They documented the speed, the strength, the hunting prowess that had so thoroughly humbled their research team. Add personal notation, ZYX 427 dictated to their neural interface. Perhaps the greatest scientific error is not in failing to observe, but in believing we have observed enough. Earth's reptiles have not merely survived millions of years of evolution. They have mastered it in ways we never imagined possible. As the empirical truth prepared to break orbit, the research team gathered for one final observation of the planet below. Somewhere down there, a Komodo dragon was probably sprinting across its territory, blissfully unaware that it had just revolutionized galactic science. You know, Ven 12 mused, their scales shifting to a contemplative purple. We should probably warn the next research team about the velociraptors. The room fell silent. The what? Crane 89 asked, all four eyes blinking rapidly. Oh yes, Ven 12 continued, pulling up yet another data file. Apparently, Earth used to have reptiles that could. The ensuing discussion would lead to another complete revision of their report, this time including a special section titled, Historical Analysis. Why we should be grateful Earth's fastest reptiles are extinct. The report. The Grand Hall of Xenobiological Studies buzzed with an energy normally reserved for the discovery of sentient life forms. Thousands of the galaxy's most prestigious scientists had gathered, their collective scales creating a shimmering aurora of anticipation. At the center of the controversy stood senior researcher ZYX 427, about to present what many were already calling the most embarrassing revelation in galactic survey history. The projection sphere hummed to life, casting a soft blue glow across the assembled academics. ZYX 427 scales shifted to the formal gold of scientific presentation as they activated their neural interface. Esteemed colleagues, they began, their voice modulator carefully calibrated for maximum gravitas. I stand before you to present evidence that will fundamentally alter our understanding of evolutionary potential across the galaxy. But first, I must confess to a rather significant error in judgment. The holographic display erupted with footage from their Komodo Island expedition. Gasps rippled through the audience as they watched the research team's dignified retreat, which absolutely wasn't running away, as ZYX-427 had carefully noted in their report. For centuries, we have operated under certain assumptions about reptilian capabilities, they continued, while behind them played the now infamous footage of their security fields being breached by an unexpectedly athletic lizard. Those assumptions, I must report, were spectacularly incorrect. Secondary analyst Crane89 advanced the presentation to their revised classification system. Our initial assessment of Earth's reptiles as typical Class 3 low-energy organisms failed to account for several crucial factors. Namely, their ability to outrun our research team while we attempted to maintain our scientific dignity. The audience rustled with a mixture of amusement and disbelief. Professor Youth 891, holder of the prestigious chair of reptilian studies, raised a skeptical appendage. Are we to understand, the professor intoned, their scales flickering with academic doubt, that a single species has invalidated 3,000 years of established theory? Junior observer Ven 12 eagerly jumped in, their excitement overwhelming their sense of protocol. Oh, not just one species. Wait until you see what their snakes can do. The next hour dissolved into a cascade of revelations that sent ripples of shock through the galactic scientific community. The presentation showed basilisk lizards running across water, monitors climbing vertical surfaces, snakes striking faster than their instruments could measure, and various other demonstrations of reptilian capabilities that defied their previous understanding. Our revised classification system, ZYX-427 explained, trying to maintain composure while showing footage of their hasty evacuation, now includes 17 new categories just for Earth-scaled species. We've had to invent 6 new terms just to describe their locomotion patterns. The data continued to flow. Chemical analyses of venom compounds that made their best synthetic toxins look primitive, thermal imaging showing sophisticated temperature regulation strategies, and behavioral studies suggesting intelligence levels that bordered on uncomfortable. In conclusion, ZYX-427 declared, their scales now pulsing with the deep purple of scientific humility, we recommend an immediate revision of all galactic survey protocols. No more assumptions about primitive species. No more dismissing evolutionary innovations as improbable. And most importantly, no more getting within sprinting distance of anything that looks like it might be capable of 12 miles per hour. The ensuing debate lasted 17 standard cycles and required 3 emergency additions to the scientific lexicon just to properly express the range of new concepts being discussed. The Galactic Survey Corps found itself flooded with requests from researchers suddenly very interested in studying Earth's reptilian species, albeit from a safe distance. There is one final recommendation, Crane89 added, their scales shifting to the formal patterns of official protocol. We propose designating Earth as a Class 5 high-energy biosphere, with a special notation warning future research teams about the inadvisability of assuming anything about its inhabitants' capabilities. The motion passed unanimously, though several senior researchers needed smelling salts when they saw the complete data package. Earth was officially reclassified, and a new warning was added to all survey protocols. Caution. Local species may exceed theoretical performance limitations. Maintain safe distance from anything with scales. As the presentation concluded, Professor Youth 891 approached the research team, their scales displaying the complex pattern that indicated both academic respect and mild terror. Fascinating work, they admitted, all 4 eyes blinking rapidly. Though I must ask, why didn't you include the historical data about their extinct reptilian species in the main presentation? ZYX-427 scales blanched to pure white. Professor, we felt that adding information about velociraptors might cause unnecessary panic. Some things are best left for the classified appendices. The professor's scales shifted to a curious shade of green. Velociraptors? I was referring to the aquatic reptiles. The mosasaurs? The plesiosaurs? The ensuing silence was broken only by the soft thud of junior observer Ven 12 fainting dead away, their scales flashing the unprecedented pattern for, thank the galaxy they're extinct. Conclusion. One standard galactic year after the infamous Komodo incident, the observation deck of the Empirical Truth bore little resemblance to its former self. Gone were the simplistic Class 3 monitoring devices and basic thermal sensors. In their place stood an array of high-speed tracking equipment, reinforced security fields, and what Ven 12 had dubbed their panic propulsion emergency systems. Senior researcher ZYX 427 hovered before the main viewport, watching Earth rotate peacefully below. Their scales rippled with the iridescent pattern of scientific wisdom, a pattern they'd only achieved after their complete theoretical framework had been demolished by a particularly athletic lizard. Final protocol updates are complete, announced Crane 89, their appendages dancing across holographic controls. The new Galactic Survey guidelines for Earth reptilian studies have been distributed to all research vessels. The document, now required reading for every xenobiologist in training, contains such helpful entries as: always assume the specimen can move faster than you think. If you can see the reptile has already seen you. That rock formation might be an apex predator. Maintain distance accordingly. Message incoming from Central Command, the ship's AI announced, its tone somehow conveying both amusement and resignation. They're requesting our presence at the Academy of Xenoscience. Apparently, the junior researchers don't believe our footage is real. ZYX 427 emitted the equivalent of a sigh. Show them the thermal imaging from the beach incident. The holographic display activated, showing a marine iguana swimming at depths their previous models had deemed impossible. Alongside it played readings from a yellow-bellied sea snake, maintaining underwater speeds that had caused 3 separate equipment malfunctions. Have we received any updates from Research Team Gamma? Ven 12 inquired, their scales still showing traces of anxiety from their last Earth expedition. The one studying something called a frilled neck lizard? Still in recovery, Crane 89 reported, suppressing a color shift of amusement. Apparently they weren't prepared for bipedal running capabilities. Their report included several new expressions that the Language Council is still trying to translate. The team had learned to approach their research with a newfound humility. Their latest survey equipment included features their previous selves would have dismissed as unnecessarily paranoid: quantum-locked safety barriers, emergency teleportation beacons, and what they'd officially termed rapid scientific retreat propulsion systems. New research proposal incoming, the AI announced. The Galactic Biology Institute wants us to lead an expedition to study something called a saltwater crocodile. The entire team's scales simultaneously shifted to the pale yellow of professional concern. They'd read those files. They'd seen the numbers. Some things were best studied from orbit. Prepare my response, ZYX 427 commanded, their scales settling into the formal patterns of diplomatic refusal. Remind them of Article 7 in our revised research protocols. Just because it's sunbathing doesn't mean it's slow. As they prepared for their next mission, the observation deck screens displayed their new classification system. Earth's reptiles now occupied their own unique category, designated as evolutionarily unexpected with a subcategory of faster than you think. The system had earned them both acclaim and mockery in scientific circles, until other research teams started encountering Earth's scaled residents for themselves. One final update to the database, Ven 12 announced, their appendages moving with practiced efficiency. Added warning notation: previous assumptions about reptilian capabilities may result in unexpected cardiopulmonary exercise. The Empirical Truth began its pre-launch sequence, preparing to visit another research site. This time they were better prepared. This time they knew better than to assume. This time they'd packed running shoes. You know, Crane 89 mused, watching the last of their reinforced equipment being loaded, perhaps we should be grateful. Grateful? ZYX 427 inquired, their scales shifting to curiosity. Indeed. Grateful that Earth's current reptiles gave us this lesson in humility. Imagine if we'd started our survey during the Cretaceous period. The entire team's scales blanched simultaneously at the thought. Sometimes, they reflected, scientific progress came not from careful observation or meticulous theory, but from the simple realization that nature had a way of surpassing all their careful classifications. As the ship prepared to break orbit, ZYX 427 made one final entry in their personal log. Perhaps the greatest discovery in science is not finding what we expect, but learning to expect what we cannot imagine. Also, never underestimate anything with scales. Ever? The empirical truth shimmered and vanished into hyperspace, leaving Earth and its surprisingly athletic reptiles behind. Somewhere on Komodo Island, a dragon sprinted across its territory at 12 miles per hour, carrying with it the honor of having completely revolutionized galactic science. And in the ship's database, a new special note was added to Earth's file, warning to all future research teams, they're faster than you think. All of them. Yes, even that one sunning itself on the rock. Especially that one.